Half a day. Half a day. Buenas and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's an honor to welcome you here this evening, and I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to travel to the hotel this evening to join us for this special and informative presentation on the topic of inflammation and how it relates to chronic disease. The Guam Seventh-day Adventist Clinic is thrilled to host Dr. Eddie Ramirez as he discusses some practical applications of lifestyle medicine, a field of medicine that focuses on daily habits and changes to our behaviors to reverse and prevent chronic diseases. I'm Dr. Jonathan Thorpe, an internal medicine and lifestyle medicine physician at the clinic, and it's really my pleasure to welcome each of you here this evening. And I want to take a special moment here to acknowledge one of our senators, Senator Therese Terlahi. Please stand. Thank you so much for gracing us with your presence this evening. We're thrilled that you can be here also. As an introduction, I want to take just a couple minutes to discuss the impact of diet on chronic disease and how a whole food, plant-based diet can reverse many of our physical and mental health ailments. And as you may know, many of the chronic diseases that we face, such as heart disease, such as diabetes, such as cancer, all have a leading connection. And it's also one of the leading causes of death when you look at causes of death globally. The World Health Organization estimates approximately 71%. 3 out of every 4 deaths that occur are related to these common diseases. An estimated 41 million people die each year because of unhealthy diet and unhealthy lifestyles. And these unhealthy diets have a common connection, have a common final pathway, so to speak, to use a medicine term, where the highly processed food with high contents of animal products, refined carbohydrates, those refined sugars that taste oh so good, are eaten in higher quantities and are healthy. These foods cause inflammation, and the inflammation wreaks havoc on our body, causing oxidative stress, which damages our cells and causes the onset of cancer and various diseases. It leads to insulin resistance and the progression of diabetes. It results in altered bacterial types and amounts in our gut and leads again to these common diseases being developed, manifested, and progressing. And the data really is unequivocal, and I am not going to steal Dr. Ramirez's data this evening because I want you to hear from him. But there is good news that we can prevent and reverse many of these diseases. As food blogger Michael Pollan says, eat food, mostly plants, not too much. I think those are wise words, and as I think of the Chamorro cultures I've met and had the privilege of working with so many patients over the last 2 to 3 years, I think back to your heritage of 200-300 years ago before the Western influences came to this island, and how longevity and health was a common theme, and yet I see the opposite in so many of my patients this evening. A whole food plant-based diet is one that emphasizes fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, nuts, seeds, herbs, spices, all of which lower inflammation and cause the improvement of diseases. So in conclusion, lifestyle medicine is a holistic approach to health that recognizes the importance of diet as a key determinant of our health outcome. And by adopting these healthy changes to one's diet, we not only can prevent, but we can also treat many chronic diseases and also improve our quality of life and well-being during the time. It's my honor this evening to welcome Dr. Eddie Ramirez to you this evening. Thank you, Dr. Ramirez, for joining us. He is a medical doctor, research scientist, and a published author. and an international speaker. He's the director of HealthWise Lifestyle Medicine in Pennsylvania, and he's had 28 years of experience working in lifestyle centers around the world, sharing the good news that these therapeutic approaches to chronic disease can radically change and transform one's life. He's published more than 160 scientific publications. That's a big number. Have 2 on my CV. And they took a lot of work to get those 2. So I can't imagine how many thousands of hours have been spent putting down fascinating findings into the literature. His work has been featured in various programs such as NBC's Taxoma, Icelandic National TV, and EcuVision. He's a co-author of the 3rd edition of the textbook of lifestyle medicine and the book Rethink Food. I'm looking forward to reading that one. Co-authored with national experts on the topic of nutrition, lifestyle medicine, Drs. Neil Barnhard, Michael Greger, Hans Deal, and Joel Fernham, and other lifestyle medicine leaders. He enjoys traveling and serving others, and I'm glad you've traveled to Guam this evening. So thank you, Dr. Ramirez, for coming. We want to welcome you, and thank you for coming this evening. I'm looking forward to learning a lot, and I want to encourage you to take out your notepads and to take out your phones and prepare to take some notes, because we will have approximately 15 to 20 minutes at the end of this evening's presentation where we will lead a dialogue, a series of questions and answers for you to ask your questions of our expert and for him to be able to provide you answers. And so I'd like to, before you speak, invite Mrs. Dora Desamore to come and to present you with a little token of appreciation. Thank you. Thank you so much. You're welcome.
Well, good evening, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here in Guam. It's my first time that I've been here in this beautiful island, and so far what I've seen is wonderful. You guys are very blessed to live in this country. You know, somebody came and visited me recently to my home. What is this animal? What a beautiful animal, isn't it? Who thinks that? I like these creatures, maybe because I'm originally from Mexico. Did you know in the center of the flag of Mexico, what's there? A rattlesnake. Well, how come there's a rattlesnake in the flag of Mexico? Well, supposedly the story goes that a group of people wanted to build a city, and supposedly the sign was to find an eagle eating a snake. And supposedly that's what they found in what today is Mexico City. And that's why they built Mexico City down there. I published quite a bit. This is one of our latest studies. In this study, we were documenting how hydrotherapy, one of the best preventions and treatments for COVID-19. And you know, regarding hydrotherapy worldwide, one of the leaders of this happened to be the Finnish people. What do the Finnish people do that is unique worldwide? They do the sauna bath. Okay? In fact, the word sauna is actually a Finnish word. So most of the homes have a sauna, and then they have the public saunas. You know, Finnish people are like very quiet people and so forth. Well, they like to go to the public sauna so they could communicate and connect with other people. In fact, just 2 weeks ago, I was actually giving some seminars in Finland. And for those of you that are not familiar with the sauna bath, it's basically a room made out of wood. You have a source of heat. You heat those rocks, and then you put water, and then steam fills the whole room and increases the body temperature. And we know now why this works. See, there's something called the interference. And the interference interfere with viruses. not only with COVID-19, but other viral infections. So as you can see in this study, as the body temperature increases, when the body reaches 102.2, notice the amount of interferon that is secreted. It tremendously increases, and that is very good. In fact, we could actually predict who was going to end up with that severe type of COVID because they had lower levels of this interference. So my wife and my daughters, we went to Finland, and of course we had to go where? To the sauna bath. So this is what we did. After going out of the sauna bath, you can see it was in the winter, there's snow in the ground. And then you can see there my daughter. And then you can see my other daughter. That lake is about to be frozen. It's like 33, 34 degrees. And there's my wife. And that's me. So as you can see, if you do that, you don't die. I'm still alive. Okay? Of course, don't do this if you have a heart problem. You're not going to get out of that water. Okay? You need to be physically fit to do this. I actually wrote a whole book about immunity. The name of that book is Pandemic Busters. They're actually translating that book into 16 languages. We are about to finish the French version this week. And this book, promotes those healthy interventions. You can find the book on Amazon. It's available in hard copy, soft cover, or if you like to listen to books on audio, it's available on Audioverse also. And the book is written in a very interactive way. It's not just text, but rather plenty of illustrations. And of course, there's a full chapter there about hydrotherapy. And we also have a children's book. It's called I Have the Flu, What Should I Do? And it teaches children, good behaviors about the importance of drinking water, of going to bed early, of doing exercise, and all those good things that we want our children to do. And we just released another one that is called I Have the Blues, What Should I Do? Talking about specifically mental health. And the book is written very nicely by a professional illustrator. In fact, if you want to copy a few chapters of my book, you can get some chapters free. Just go to this website, go to healthwise.store. Remember that Wise is WHYS. And then once you get to the page there, there's a link there that says free downloads. Just click there, and then you can actually download multiple chapters of the book completely free in multiple languages. So select there the language that fits with you. And this is my contact info. Let me give you here this information from the beginning. All my research is found on the first link. Just Google Francisco, which is my other name, Ramirez ResearchGate. That's where you're going to reach there where my research is. There's also a very active Twitter account, Eddie RDMD. There is also a YouTube page with videos from multiple languages, dr.eddieramirez.com. And if you want to come and travel with me around the world, there is that Instagram page when I'm putting, what I am seeing as I'm traveling around. Things that I put on my Twitter account. Look at this very interesting study. How not doing exercise is worse for you than being a smoker, having heart disease, and having diabetes. That's how bad it is for you to not do exercise. And I try to do what I tell you. This morning, as I woke up this morning, I went for a nice run here in Guam. Look at this other study in which it predicts how much exercise you can do predicts how long you're going to live. That's why it's so important to be physically fit, because it relates to your longevity. And this other one, fascinating study, how when a male drinks alcohol and within 3 months makes his partner pregnant, that baby has a 44% increased risk of a heart defect. And if they abuse alcohol by binge drinking 6 months before making their partners pregnant, that increases to a 52% the risk of having a heart defect, that baby. That's why alcohol and fertility, not the best companion. This study just came out, journal Nature, one of the top journals in the world, how we're seeing a very worrisome increase of cancers among people that are younger than 50. See, this type of cancers, we used to see them in people in the 60s, 70s, 80s, but now young people are getting these problems. And the journal documents what are some of the main triggers: alcohol, not enough sleep, smoking, obesity, and those highly processed foods. This other one, how sitting down for too long increases your risk of stroke. That's why we need to, move with regularity. It is not good just to be sitting down the whole day. And this other one, longest living living male on earth, this Japanese person, they ask him, what is the secret of your longevity? 2 things: always smile and don't get angry. When you get angry, you generate what are called the oxygen-free radicals, which age you faster and actually increase your risk of disease. So it's not worth it, Rather forgive and move on. Again, all those studies are there on that Twitter account, and continually I put new studies with the purpose of motivating you to do those positive lifestyle changes in the long run. So, let us talk about the topic of today, which is inflammation. There's something very interesting. It's called a geographical pattern of disease. In other words, there's places on earth where we find a lot of disease, and there's places on earth where disease happens to be more rare. Here, as a U.S. territory, the statistics of America apply very much. Now, where we find a lot of cancer? Sadly, in U.S. areas. And the same pattern holds true for other diseases, such as diabetes, obesity, and so forth. Let's put some numbers so we can see this change of geographical disease burden. Look at this. Compare the amount of prostate cancer in America with Bangladesh. Tiny little bit difference? It is humongous, the difference. And as we're going to learn today, it has to do with this concept of inflammation. So put attention as we will be dissecting this topic very carefully. Look at this study, fascinating study. So you have Japanese people that live in Japan. You find it under the red. The graphic is showing you the amount of breast cancer. The higher the number, the higher the amount of breast cancer. Now notice what happens with the color orange. Those are the daughters of those that move to America from Japan. What happened? It more than doubled. And then look at the daughters of the daughters. That's in yellow. And the daughters of the daughters of the daughters in that green-blue color. What's happening there? As the persons start to acquire the American lifestyle, the number of cancers starts to climb and climb and climb. That's why I am so glad that you guys are here tonight, because you're going to open your eyes to see how many times the choices we are taking may be increasing our risk for many of the common killers. So what is this concept of inflammation that I'm talking about? Okay, I want you to remember the last time you poked yourself with a needle. Somebody here has poked yourself with a needle. Or I should say a fish hook with you guys, isn't it? What happened? It felt so good. Man, such pleasurable sensation, isn't it? What happened? There was pain. First symptom of inflammation. The reason why you're having pain, we were designed so that when we feel the pain, we pull out to try to avoid, further damage to our tissues. What else happened? Any change in the size of the finger you poke? Swelling, second symptom of inflammation. Any change in the temperature of the finger you poke and the other one you didn't? Warmth. And what about the color? Any change in the color? So you have this redness. And the reason why you're having that reaction is because, this is a principle, anytime I break cells, those cells, and this is the most complicated word of the night, release something that is called arachidonic acid. So whenever the cell pops out, arachidonic acid is released, and that starts this cascade that starts the process of inflammation. Okay? So these 4 symptoms, did you know there are documents that survive today from the very first century? There were doctors back then, and they noticed this phenomena of inflammation. The reason why you're having that inflammation is because without inflammation, your body wouldn't heal. So you start the process of inflammation, healing starts to take place, and then once the healing takes place, the body shuts down inflammation. What happened when you poked yourself with a needle? Did it last 3 months? No, isn't it? After a few hours, if it was a little bit more severe, a couple of days, then everything came back to normal. Inflammation was shut down. So anytime I injure my tissues, the body will respond with inflammation, be it twisting your ankle, burning yourself, poking yourself with a needle. The body will respond with inflammation. Now, there was a very wise physician from Germany that started realizing that most of the disease that he was seeing as a doctor, he started putting 2 by 2 together. He said, you know what? Most of these diseases that I see happen to be caused by chronic inflammation. So inflammation that kept going and going and going, from the arthritis to the dementia to the heart disease to the cancer, all these things, the origin of this problem was an inflammation that went long term. In fact, if we check the causes of death here in WAM, you're going to realize that most of those causes of death are directly related to inflammation. And that's why it's so important that you are here tonight, so you can learn this information and you don't become part of these statistics. And have you ever seen that we doctors use a lot the word itis? Oh, you have colitis. Oh, you have pneumonitis. Itis means inflammation. Now, when that itis keeps going, the cells can change and you can end up with a very serious disease such as a cancer. So before the cancer appeared, there was that process of itis for a long period of time, and then the cells started changing. So don't wait until you have the cancer. Stop that inflammation ASAP before starts changing your cells. And we're going to be learning how we can do that tonight. In fact, the famous COVID-19, guess what? It causes inflammation. So people that already had chronic inflammation, when they got this virus, which also causes inflammation, inflammation plus inflammation equals what? Even more inflammation. Those were the people that would end up hospitalized with severe type of damage to their organs because the body's inflammation was going just off the roof and the body started attacking our own body. So here is one of the biggest problems with chronic inflammation. Notice this book that I have at home. It says that inflammation is caused by the way we live, and that is what gives us chronic diseases such as heart disease, such as osteoarthritis. And what type of link is there? It's a silent link, and that is the biggest problem with chronic inflammation. See, if you have a broken bone, I don't know how courageous you are. I'm telling you, sooner or later, I'm going to see you at the ER. And you're going to come to me and you're going to say, "Doctor, this hurts so bad. Please help me." Yes or no? But the problem of inflammation is that in many instances, it doesn't hurt. So you don't realize you have this inflammation. You think that everything is going very well. And unfortunately, inflammation is destroying your body. And we know very well that. Look at this. There is this gene, NF-kappa B. When that activates, inflammation is like the main switch of inflammation of the body. Notice how all kinds of diseases are directly related with inflammation. And that's why we don't want that chronic inflammation in our body. In this journal, they make the analogy from inflammation with what do you see there? Fire. Is it a good idea to play with fire? No, because you're going to get burned if you keep on playing with fire. Don't play with fire. In fact, Time magazine calls inflammation what? The sacred killer. And I see this, patient comes to me. We do, complete history to understand what are the habits of the person. We do some blood tests to figure out what's happening inside their body. And I can clearly see there is inflammation in this patient. So I tell the patient, you know what? We need to make some changes. Guess what? There are some patients that are going to tell me, changes? Me? I don't need to make any changes. I feel okay. Why should I make any changes? But they don't realize, as Time magazine says, the fires within you are destroying your life, shortening your life, decreasing the quality of your life as inflammation starts to make a disaster inside of your body. And this is the way that I like to explain this to my patients. I live in Pennsylvania, where it's nice and cold there for the whole winter. And having a fireplace there is very nice because then it makes things livable, when things are, at 20 degrees outside and so forth. Now, what would happen if you have a bunch of wood and you put wood in the fireplace and keep putting wood and wood and wood, and the wood starts to pile outside of the fireplace? What's going to happen? Because of the laws of physics, sooner or later, that fire is going to creep out of there. And what's going to be the result? Disaster is going to be the result. That is what happens with chronic inflammation. Don't put too much wood outside of the fireplace, or you're going to get yourself in really big trouble. So, where is this inflammation coming from? Well, let's go and deal with some of the common sources of chronic inflammation. Alcohol, any form of alcohol, from beer to vodka to tequila to wine, is tremendously inflammatory. I'll show you an interesting study in a minute about it. Also, cigarette smoking, very inflammatory. I have a brother-in-law, much younger than me, and just a few months ago, bam, heart attack. Secondary to his habit of smoking, which he picked up when he was a teenager. Also, sunlight. You guys are blessed with so much sunlight here. Sunlight is really good for your health. But too much sunlight is inflammatory. Doctor, how do I know I got too much sunlight? Well, did it get red? Did it get swollen? Did it hurt? Remember the symptoms of inflammation? Watch out. If they appear, it means it was too much. So make sure, get enough sunlight, but protect yourself from excess sunlight. Also, products that come from animals. Why? Well, think about it. What did we say causes the inflammation? We said that when the cells break, they release what? Arachidonic acid. Now, when you're eating, let's say, a chicken, what are you eating? You're eating cells of that animal, yes or no? What's inside those cells? Arachidonic acid. So, you don't necessarily need to burn. You don't necessarily need to twist your ankle. By eating those foods, you trigger inflammation because you're eating arachidonic acid. Also, excess body weight will trigger inflammation. I'll show you some interesting studies in a minute. So, you can do this experiment in your own home. Choose your favorite alcoholic beverage, let's say wine, and then get a few mice, and then you want to paint that alcohol on the skin of these mice many times in a day. In a few months, you're going to have a cancerous tumor. And why is that? And the answer starts with an I. Why? Inflammation. You cause inflammation. That inflammation was not corrected. You continue to create that inflammation. The cells change. You end up with a cancer. And you can even see this effect at the level of the brain. This is a normal scan of the brain. We're seeing the brain bottom up. In the middle, that's where the spine connects. That's why you see that little hole there in the middle. Look what happens. This is a healthy brain. By the way, this is called the SPECT scan. It's not showing the anatomy of the brain. It's showing the function of the brain. Notice what happens on somebody that uses marijuana. It decreases tremendously the frontal lobes of that brain, removing motivation, decreasing emotional intelligence, and so forth. What if you use a little bit Something else like alcohol. Notice what happened with the alcohol brain. It's causing tremendous decrease of blood flow to the brain, and that's not good. That is increasing your risk for dementia or other problems. And here, notice this very interesting study trying to find causes of cancer which are inflammatory. You see, tobacco, very inflammatory. What's even more inflammatory according to this study? That means that in my home, I have something very dangerous. It's called a fork. What I'm poking with that fork is either increasing my inflammation or decreasing my inflammation. And then, as you can see, that third factor of obesity, infections, and other minor factors. So here's a nice chart there showing different sources of inflammation. So virus and bacteria, we'll come back to that in a minute. Pollution is also inflammatory, but also stress. Stress can be inflammatory. That's why we need to learn to deal with our stress correctly, because too much stress can cause inflammation. I've done a study about that. And in this study, we had more than 6,000 people in our sample. And what we're trying to figure out are what are the best behaviors to manage stress to decrease anxiety. Again, big sample, 6,500 people from all over the world. There's people here from Asia, from the Americas, South America, Australia, New Zealand, and so forth. Notice the results. We found out that Bible study is actually one of the best ways of dealing with stress. And you know, this is free, isn't it? It doesn't even cost anything. While things like Eastern meditation are actually quite similar in their effect with not doing anything for your stress level, more of a placebo type of effect. And also we found there in second place prayer as a good way of dealing with that excess stress. Now, notice this interesting study. Notice the title of the paper. It says that the cells that are in the person that has a problem with his weight are in what state? What says there? Pro-inflammatory. Now, let me tell you the good news, bad news. Bad news is the reason why this happens is because of two factors. Number one, the fat cells, when they are in excess, they start secreting signals in your body to turn on inflammation. That's factor number one. Factor number two is the fact that many times fat cells are very unstable cells that can break very easily. What do we say? Anytime we break cells, we release arachidonic acid and we start triggering the cascade of inflammation. That's the bad news. Here's the good news. The good news is that if you have excess body weight, as soon as you start losing 1 or 2 pounds, that's enough to start to shut down that chronic inflammation. So if you have excess body weight, use that as a motivation to start in that road to get on your proper weight. And in that way, we're going to win that battle against that chronic inflammation related to weight. And this is a very good article in which it was documenting especially the fat that is here inside my belly. That is the dangerous fat. That is the type of fat that is extremely inflammatory. That should be my main target if I want to decrease chronic inflammation. And you can see this paper, in which it was documented that excess body weight is linked to all kinds of cancers. And now we know why. The answer starts with an I. Why is that? Inflammation, because it's inflammatory, therefore it changes those cells, increasing the risk of a cancer. Also, osteoarthritis, a very, very common problem. The origin of this, guess what? Is not bad luck. It is chronic inflammation. In fact, in societies like in rural Asia or rural Africa, where people are carrying tremendous amounts of weight and so forth, osteoarthritis is very rare. You want to see osteoarthritis, you go to a Western society. When they have, the wrong type of diet and poor exercise and so forth, this is where you see a lot of this osteoarthritis. So again, we can avoid, this disability by making the proper changes. So here's also a nice chart of things that cause inflammation. So alcohol, we talked about alcohol, excess ultraviolet light, we also talked about that. Stress, we talked about that. Cigarette smoking, also very inflammatory. And also viruses. It's not only one, but multiple viruses. One common virus that is the cause of the cervical uterine cancer in the female and the cancer of the male organ is a virus by the name of the papillomavirus. 2 or more sexual partners increase tremendously your risk of this virus. Sadly, studies show that here in America, some high schools, 3/4 of the young people already carry this virus, which is not good because it's a very inflammatory virus. Bacteria also can cause inflammation. The way you cook food, we'll talk about that in a minute, and then pollution can also trigger chronic inflammation. A few more things that cause inflammation: not sleeping enough. You have to prioritize rest. Let me tell you the good news, bad news. I have a video about sleep on my YouTube page. It has 2.8 million views. It's a viral video. That's the good news. The bad news is that it's in Spanish. Next one, sugar-loaded drinks. Any food that is processed will increase inflammation, including sugar. So watch out, all those sodas are very inflammatory. This one, how much you sit down. If you sit down for too long, that is inflammatory. In fact, I have, because of the work I do, I had to, do a lot of computer typing and so forth. I work from a standing desk. So in that way, I add some physical activity, even the fact that I have to be there in that desk and so forth. This other one, how eating trans fats. You get these trans fats when you get this oil that is used over and over and over and over. These trans fats are horrible for your arteries, and they are very inflammatory. And also, this is something that is called inflammaging. It's a new term that they're using. So, inflammation will cause a premature aging of your body. And the fact that you have inflammation, it will also cause atrophy of your muscles. In other words, higher risk for disability. Okay, if your muscles become weak, then you cannot walk, you cannot move, you cannot take care of yourself. Another of the important reasons why we need to shut down inflammation ASAP. And also gingivitis, inflammation of your gums. You know, I don't like dentists, but I need those dentists, you know. So if you have an issue with your mouth, you have to deal with it. Because as long as you have that inflammation of your gum, you are causing chronic inflammation on the rest of your body. Even though it's just here the problem, your whole body is being affected by it. And notice this fascinating study. In this study, they had two groups. One group, both groups stayed fasting overnight. One group kept on fasting just for comparison's sake, while the other group ate the following inflammatory breakfast, which consisted of white bread, which is inflammatory, egg, which is inflammatory, cheese, which is inflammatory, sausage, which is inflammatory, and these hash browns. Notice what happened on somebody that ate that breakfast. As soon as you ate that breakfast, inflammation exploded in the body. Now, if you were to eat this once a year, it's not that big of a deal. Your inflammation is going to go up, and after a couple of days, it's going to go down. But think about it. Inflammatory breakfast, inflammatory lunch, inflammatory supper. What are you doing? Wood and wood and wood on the fireplace, and sooner or later the wood is piling outside of the fireplace, and the natural thing to do is those fires are going to start creeping out of that fireplace, and I'm telling you, disaster is going to be the result of that. So that's why we need to be conscious, what are we feeding ourselves with? Notice this study published in the journal Nutrients, and it says there, the association between animal product consumption and cancer was as strong as that linking tobacco and cancer. And now we know why. And the answer starts with an I. Why? Inflammation. So using tobacco is inflammatory. Using animal products is inflammatory also. It's just the way it works. See, your ancestors didn't eat so many animal products. Did you know that it was the Spanish the one that brought the cows? It was the Spanish the one that brought all those chickens that are running around there. They're not from this island, you know. They came from outside. It was the Spanish that brought the pigs and so forth. So even when the Spanish came and brought those animals, you know, if you had, for example, a pig there in your property, you couldn't eat your pig every day. Only the king of Guam, he had 200 of them, and he could kill one of them every day, no problem. But the average person couldn't do that. So that excess is causing us all kinds of troubles. Notice the study, how cigarette smoking turns on that main switch of inflammation in the whole body. And notice, only smoking one cigarette turns on inflammation even more than a day. Now, does the smoker smoke only one cigarette? Wood and wood and wood, isn't it? And then you get yourself in really big trouble. Now, some of you may be saying, Doctor, I don't smoke. Congratulations that you don't smoke, but I hope you don't do this. This is Journal Science, one of the top journals in the world, demonstrating that eating 2 pounds of charred grilled steak equivalent to smoking 600 cigarettes. Tremendously inflammatory. And this is the headache in public health. See, let me tell you this. In my microbiology book, when I study medicine, it said the following: a piece of chicken has so much bacteria, even more bacteria than your toilet. So this is the headache with this type of foods. If you don't cook it enough, there is all kinds of nasty bugs in that piece of chicken. There is Listeria, Campylobacter, E. coli, Salmonella, and all kinds of nasty bugs. But if you cook it too much, what happens? Starts to become carcinogenic. So where do you draw the line? This is the very, very difficult question to answer. And even Alzheimer's disease, this we know very well. The reason why it triggers the destruction of the connections between your nerve cells is because, guess what? Inflammation. Inflammation, anytime you're triggering inflammation, you're losing some of those connections in your brain. Now you may say, doctor, but the other day I ate a hamburger and I didn't forget anything. Well, the reason being is because you have billions and billions of those connections. But keep it up. Keep eating that, and you're going to start destroying so many of those that you're going to get yourself in really big trouble. Your latest statistic says that dementia is increasing tremendously here in Guam. So look at this very fascinating study. It took the most common killers of America, and it was documenting what were the factors, what were the causes of those common killers. So you can see dietary risk, as we saw, can cause inflammation. Tobacco use can also cause inflammation. Notice there, high blood pressure, the triggers of that usually is some inflammatory factor there. High body mass index, as we talked about, is inflammatory. And then high cholesterol, usually the foods that cause the high cholesterol are inflammatory foods. And then also you have problems of the kidney. What destroyed that kidney was inflammation in the long term in the first place. And then you have alcohol, as we saw, is very inflammatory, as well as drug use, and then air pollution, inflammation also, and low physical activity is also inflammatory. When you do exercise, you decrease inflammation. So can you see why inflammation topic is so important? Because it is the source of most of those diseases that we see in the clinical practice. So here's the question. Is inflammation your friend or your enemy? What's the answer here? Depends. Wait a minute. We said that if you didn't have inflammation after you poke your finger, it would never heal. So the reason why you have that inflammation there after you poke yourself with the needle is because the healing process started. So the answer is rather, it depends. Okay? Acute inflammation, short-term inflammation, that's a very good friend of yours. But chronic inflammation, that is the very worst friend that you can have, because it's literally going to destroy you unless you stop that chronic inflammation. So it's like the following illustration. Let's say you go up to the North Pole. And man, it's really, really cold, and you find some polar bears there. And you say, oh, poor polar bears, it's too cold there. Even though the polar bear is having a grand time down there. That's where God designed it, and he is happy there. But you say, no, it's too cold. I know of a desert. I'm going to bring that polar bear to the desert. You think the polar bear is going to be happy? No, the polar bear was not designed to live there. Therefore, you get yourself in trouble. The same story happens with inflammation. This is a photographic study of what the average person eats in America. We're eating food that we are not designed to eat. And we're getting ourselves in really big trouble by doing that. Notice here, everything there is processed. I mean, the only healthy thing I can see there are those grapes and the tomatoes. Other than that is highly inflammatory food. So we need to go back to the basics and learn to eat non-inflammatory food. So where do we find that? We need to run to the farmer's market. That's where they have the extinguisher to stop those fires of inflammation. So our diet should consist of plenty of fruits. You guys are so blessed here. I just saw those mango trees loaded there with anti-inflammatory mangoes, you know. And then you have vegetables. All the vegetables are your friends. Now there's a principle. These fruits and vegetables, depending on the color, they have different properties. So learn to eat the rainbow. Don't just eat, banana or one type. Rather have that variety. Each different shade has different properties. Think about it. There's fruits and vegetables that are black. Some are purple, some are blue, some are red, some are orange, some are yellow, some are white. Have variety, and in that way you get all these antioxidant elements. Also, legumes, one of the best foods around. What are those legumes? Your beans, your lentils, your chickpeas. This should be the foundation of your meals, as well as cereals, whole cereals, your quinoa, your oats, and so forth, eaten, in their whole form. They're tremendously nutritious. And then finally, this is a principle, spices that are not spicy. Okay? If they're spicy, if they're too spicy, they're going to cause irritation. And if they cause irritation, what they're going to cause? Inflammation. So, doctor, how do I know if it's too spicy? Use the child principle. If you get to a little child and the baby cries, it's too spicy. Okay? So I'm not saying don't give flavor to your food, but not too spicy. Okay? So that's why things like, black pepper and things like this are not the best for you. Rather, use turmeric. Turmeric is one of the highest antioxidant foods in the planet. In fact, every week you should be eating some form of turmeric due to its anti-inflammatory properties. So, even Harvard University, this is, their image there. You can see how those fruits, vegetables, legumes, whole cereals are anti-inflammatory, while those processed foods, animal foods, are very inflammatory. So, the question is going to be, in the bottom, you see substances that are found on plant foods that are anti-inflammatory. On the top, you see things that cause inflammation. The question tonight is going to be, who is going to win that battle? Are the substances that create inflammation going to win that battle in your life? Or are you going to overcome inflammation by eating that wholesome plant-based diet? And to me, it's so interesting that in the Bible, in the very first book of the Bible, in the verse 29, it says, "Then God said, I give you every seed-bearing plant on the face of the whole earth, and every tree that has fruit with it, they will be" what? "Your anti-inflammatory foods." It's there. It has been there since the very beginning. God, in His wisdom, given us that fire extinguisher so we could deal with that inflammation, and the principle applies even today in 2023. So thank you very much. May God bless you, and it's been a pleasure speaking to you.
Dr. Ramirez, thank you for that information. I hearken back to my days of growing up on a farm in British Columbia, Canada, for two reasons. One is that Canada is a cold place. And I am not crazy like you. I do not jump in cold water in the middle of the winter. So you have a very brave and strong constitution. Secondly is on the farm, we would prune the cherry and apple trees and collect wood and pull it together and light a match and put diesel on it and burn it up. So your analogies of throwing wood on the fire and throwing wood and more wood struck home for me this evening. So I have a question for you. We're going to take a few minutes for questions and answers. We recognize that our time is short this evening, but I don't want to pass up the opportunity to pose a few questions. You have talked about throwing wood on, and you've given many examples of the wood. Now, which piece of wood, of all the ones you've thrown on there, should we stop throwing on first?
Good question. I think that this is something that we need to do a personal reflection. For some of us, maybe the sleep. For some of us, maybe the diet. For some of us, maybe the alcohol and so forth. So make a personal reflection and try to make those changes. Also, you guys are so blessed that you have this team of experts here which do on a regular basis programs like cooking classes and so forth. Keep in contact with them, participate of their programs as they are teaching you the keys to a long, happy life. So that will be my advice.
Perfect. So we need to do some self-reflection. I am curious, what questions might you have this evening for Dr. Ramirez? We'll take maybe 5 to 7 minutes to just ask some questions from you as attendees this evening. Sir, please.
I understand the cutting back on meats, beef and chicken. How about fish?
That's right. Very good question. Okay. So depending on the fish, if a fish has fins and scales, it tends to be a fish higher in omega-3s. Okay. Now that's the good news. Let me tell you the bad news. I will be, irresponsible if I don't tell you the whole story. Unfortunately, your neighbors here, the Chinese, Filipinos, Thailand, and so forth, they're throwing tremendous amounts of garbage and chemicals on the ocean. And unfortunately, this contaminates the whole chain. So there are many different types of fish that worry us because of the tremendous amounts of toxicity. In fact, I did a study on fish. You can find it on my ResearchGate. And I cite another study there that says that today, every fish has mercury. And the body doesn't have a good way of getting rid of mercury. So mercury accumulates and it likes to go to your nervous tissue, your brain and so forth, predisposing you towards problems such as dementia, Parkinson's, and so forth. So that's the reality of the world that we live in. I'm going to give you homework. Go to Netflix. There's an excellent documentary there by the name of Seaspiracy. Excellent documentary, and get informed and try to make the best decisions on the information that you have.
Excellent. We have another question here at the back.
I initially heard about you saying about the sauna bath.
Yes.
I used to go. Hilton have a sauna bath in the gym. I don't know if they still open it up after the pandemic.
Yes.
How long should we stay in the sauna? Usually hotels have sauna and jacuzzi, right?
Yes.
So I'm getting confused. Which one should I do first? Jacuzzi, sauna, or
Okay.
what's the proper way to, and how many minutes?
Okay, excellent.
And doctor, if I could also add to that, is there any precautions that we should take on
Yes.
those who maybe shouldn't spend time in the jacuzzi or sauna?
That's right. So both of them have very beneficial characteristics. Personally, I would prefer the sauna. I enjoy very much the sauna. And you don't want to stay there more than 12, 15 minutes if you're a little bit more fit. And the reason being, if you are there too long, then you start having negative results. Also, something that doesn't mix, this Finnish people have studied saunas very well. Alcohol and saunas. Do not go to the sauna when you're drinking alcohol, because your body's ability to handle the heat is impaired. Also, if you have high blood pressure, it would be a good idea to have a conversation with your doctor before you go to the sauna. Also, if you have neuropathy, also it would be a good idea to have a conversation with your doctor before you go to the sauna. And if you're just period frail, also that's not the best place for you to go. So yeah, if you are physically fit and so forth, you should be able to handle that. How long you stay there? Sauna, as I mentioned to you, 10 to 12 minutes or so. That's a good amount. The sauna, the jacuzzi, same story. About 10 minutes or so. That's plenty. Put a cold cloth in your head while you're there, and it'll make things more comfortable as you go into that process.
Many of our young generation believe that vaping is not a big deal, that it's safer in their mind. It's such a myth. How would you explain to them how detrimental it is to their health?
That's right. Yeah, that's a personal interest of mine. In my Twitter, you're going to find many of those studies. And what this is showing is that some studies show that it's even worse than smoking. Okay? Not because there's no smoke around there, that doesn't make it safe. The fact that you're concentrating that nicotine, and guess what? Nicotine is what? Inflammatory. So that's the problem. That's why the increase of risk of cancer of the lung and so forth. Plus, your mental health suffers. I've done a few studies on nicotine demonstrating how there's a relationship between nicotine intake and your risk for depression and anxiety.
I have one final question for the audience, and I'm going to invite Pastor Mesquite to come forward. Who is ready to start stopping throwing wood on the fire? And who's ready to start pulling wood off the fire? I invite you to come back again tomorrow evening to learn more about the wood that's being thrown on the fire and how to prevent our chronic diseases.
Well, good evening, everyone. Before we say goodnight for the evening, let's have a word of prayer together as we thank the Lord for this information. Our dear, loving, and most kind and gracious Heavenly Father, we thank you for the wisdom that we have heard today from the realm of science and Scripture. And, oh Father, what a wonderful thing it is that you don't send new and wonderful information to embarrass or to condemn, but, Lord, to enlighten and to inspire. And so as we have taken all these wonderful things, give us strength and courage to obey. And Father, we know that blessings untold await us as we do. Bless everyone here as they make their way home, and bless our families. We ask and pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you so much for coming. We look forward to seeing you again tomorrow evening at 7 p.m.